Elliott, Holland, my man, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing amazingly well. How are you, Neal?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, man. I'm feeling blessed to talk with you and chat about deals and all things around deals.
Let's do it. I'm excited. Let's get some
Yeah.
information into people's hands so they can be more effective buyers and sellers.
Buyers and sellers, we're going to get into it today. Excited to have a conversation and just kind of get into it. So for those of you who are tuning in, I'm Neal Isaacs. I'm going to introduce Elliott Holland momentarily, and we're just going to have a conversation. And we've got some kind of behind the scenes type of stuff we want to share. I think it's going to kind of be our topic today. So we got some kind of deal points, but we're also going to kind of go off script a little bit. So I'm going to start with your permission, Elliott. I want to give an introduction about who you are,
Sure.
and you're welcome to give your impressions of who I am, and then we'll just kind of dive into this topic. I think we're talking about behind the scenes, what happens when brokers are involved, and then kind of the financial stuff that unfolds. That's going to be our big topic today. So
Yeah.
I'll start with an introduction of the Elliott Holland. So you may know him as the king of Q of E online. Elliott does a lot. He's multifaceted. You're talking to a Harvard graduate. This guy knows his stuff. He walks the walk. He talks the talk. I've watched a lot of his content, and he will go deep. If you ask him a question, just strap in because you're going to get a pretty significant answer. But he also knows the business, right? So one reason we're talking is he understands kind of the different parts of a deal. You know, he helps buyers with get their first deal done, but he also kind of knows the different players in there. So if you're not following the king of Q of E, really big on Twitter, he's got some great YouTube, but you can find the majority of his content on his website. So I would encourage you to check out Guardian Due Diligence.
Yep.
Check out his LinkedIn, and there's a lot of places that you can find him online. But I'm super excited to talk to you, Elliott. How's that for an introduction? I want to invite you to fill in the blanks on Elliott Holland.
No, you nailed it. The only thing I would add is that I'm a player coach. So I used to buy companies myself in private equity and as a self-funded searcher. Now I coach and help people. And so you guys watch sports. So like a Deion Sanders situation, maybe I can give some of that primetime love. And then I'll introduce you, Neal. So
okay.
Neal's an amazing individual because he's willing to get out and get in front of folks to help them think about selling their business. And so what I'll say, he's a gem in terms of a business broker who's scientific undergrad, has his MBA, has been doing this for a very long time, is independent enough to do an amazing job on YouTube. If you haven't seen his YouTube, go check it out. He's got just a lot of clean stuff, messages about the process, what you need to know, when you need to talk to him, all these kind of things that a lot of people don't know until you get into the process. Neal's helping you understand that before you get into the process. And I think just an amazing person. Having been around small business acquisition for years, I have some sense of strong brokers and not so strong brokers. And I'm on this podcast with Neal because he's in the top of the strong. So that's what I can do, Neal. I hope I did okay.
I appreciate that. I could have you just talk about me for 30 minutes, but instead, let's get into kind of what we have in common. And I think that's separating people, principles. I call them principles. There's a buyer and a seller in a deal, and they're trying to get a deal done. And I like to joke that unrepresented buyers and sellers are like teenagers having sex. Like they don't know how to do it right, and they're bound to make mistakes. So I view it as each of us are kind of helping our respective principles. And you're more on buy side, and I'm more on sell side.
That's it. Yep.
And so behind the scenes, like these folks are coming into it and they're like, I want to buy that business. And, this broker's in the way. He's got the business I want. I can't even talk to the seller. So I wanted you kind of understand this dynamic with your conversations with buyers.
Yeah.
So let's dig into that a little bit.
So people are wrong when they think that. So people love doing what they call a proprietary search, which is going out and trying to find a buyer that's not represented by a broker. And they do it for 2 weeks and most times they give up. And I'll tell you why they give up on the proprietary search. Because it's hard, capital A, capital A, all right? And so people forget the jobs that the broker does to deliver a seller to you and a sim to you prepared, that you may say the sim is imperfect, but let's just talk about the jobs the broker did. The broker went out and did a proprietary search and found a seller, talked to the seller, got all the information, the financials to put the sim together, sat for hours to get this story that's presented in the confidential information memorandum. They let the seller know what the process is going to look like. There's going to be some pain in this process. There's going to be some things you don't like, but this is the path to your $1 million exit. So we're going to have a bunch of buyers asking questions on phone calls. We're going to have a due diligence period where quality of earnings is done. This person is going to potentially get an SBA loan. You're going to have to be patient through that process. And they also ask the seller, hey, where are the holes? Where are the things that a buyer needs to know that may be unsavory about your business, but still something that they can get over as a buyer? And so when Neal delivers this sim and the seller to you, you know, in your inbox, don't forget all the jobs that he's done before this showed up. And great brokers, what they do is they deliver the seller in a smoother way than you'd ever receive it elsewhere. Meaning when the seller can answer all the questions quickly on a call, when the main 10 or 20 questions are answered in the FAQ, when the financials are clean, when the seller understands the process, that's what a broker does for these processes. And so I think we need to understand that. And I think honestly, like, applaud it more.
Well, and I want to add to that. I worked on a car lot for like a week, and I picked up so much from that. One of the things I picked up was kick him in the shins. I remember the guy training me to sell cars was like, you got to kick him in the shins. You come out and just kick him in the shins and manage their expectations is what he was talking about. Like, you're not going to get this BMW for 10 grand, right? It's going to be expensive.
That's right.
And we do that with our clients early, because typically when I got into this business, I thought I'd be like, let's go high, let's go as high as possible. Quickly you learn that if a business is overpriced, it's not going to sell. It can't be financed. So we're doing a lot of expectation management, and where buyers sometimes think we're like in the way, we've actually already hopefully got them down to a realistic sale price by the time we bring it to market.
That's a great adder. The other piece is, keep in mind, the broker works for the seller and is working for the deal as well. So I'll give you something else that brokers provide in the process. There are going to be things that you need to tell your seller that you can't tell them directly. Right? Hey, I think you're dating your controller, and I need to understand that relationship. Or, hey, those cash payments are going to be a real issue and I can't include them in EBITDA. I'm not trying to knock the price down, but I can't include them because the bank won't take them. Or other kind of unsavory things. They're like, hey, dude, it's been 2 weeks and I don't have the data for my quality of earnings. I need you to get that stuff now. And you haven't earned the trust to tell the seller that. So what do? You call the broker and say, hey, man, this is the message I need to deliver. Can you get it across to the seller for me? And if you're leveraging your broker correctly, that's another additive benefit of them being in the process.
Leveraging the broker correctly. I think that's a great talking point. So, you know, some brokers do represent buyers, some represent only sellers. Particularly, I do mainly seller representation. So the seller is my client, but the buyer is my customer, and my compensation comes through the seller, but the seller gets it from the buyer. So it's kind of a weird thing. Like, I can't get paid until the seller gets paid. So I can't, here's my point I'm trying to make. I can't tell you what the lowest price that the seller would accept, because I have a fiduciary responsibility to represent my client, the seller. But I can hold a buyer's hand and walk them through this process in service to my seller client. And that's where, if there's ever friction there with the buyer, I haven't really educated them enough to let them know, like, I really do want, if I'm going down this path with you, buyer, if I'm advocating for you, I think you're the one to get to the finish line. So let me help you. It's a tenuous thing, because the first thing I say is, I'm a dirty business broker. Don't trust me. I represent this other guy. But then I say, trust me a little bit, right? Because check what I say. Get a due diligence report but let
Sure.
me help you get access to the information you need, or let me help get past these other barriers that I know we're going to come up with.
So you made two great points. First off, the broker wants the buyer to win the process and close the deal. Don't ever forget that. Something else I
Yes.
think people forget is there's a psychology piece here. So not every broker is going to be like Neal. He's a top broker. Some brokers aren't top. All right. So, but you got to deal with whoever's there. The reality is once a seller decides to take their biggest asset, their whole retirement, to market, leveraging this business broker, they've decidedly trusted this person. And so when you act nefariously or negatively towards the person that the seller trusted to take their biggest asset to market, you don't realize what you're actually doing. You hadn't thought about the psychology of it. If the seller chose this person, that's the choice, deal with them. And I've been around this 15 years now. I will tell you, even the worst situations that I encounter with brokers, there was value that they could still deliver. Even the ones that you thought were more used car salespeople, right? Well, they're the ones that are probably best at delivering terse messages. So get the value out of the person that's there, that's committed to helping the deal consummate.
This is great, Elliott, because we're talking about behind the scenes, and I use the word, advocate. And I will tell you that when you approach the broker, it's proxy to the seller. You establish that relationship. Seller hired the broker. Seller has to pay the broker to get the deal done. So you can't circumnavigate the broker because the seller's got to pay them anyway. And the broker's having conversations without you and saying, we got buyer A, B, and C. I think buyer B is the one based on they're doing what they say. This is the conversations I have with sellers. A, B, and C, they all want to pay the same price, but buyer B is doing everything that they say they're going to do. I think we can get buyer B to the finish line.
That's right.
So you want to be that buyer B, right? You want to ingratiate yourself and just be respectful to the broker. And this isn't an ego thing for me. This is just me reading people and saying, I really want to do this job for my seller client. And I really think that this one guy or this one girl could get all the way. So think about that when you're having those interactions, because if you're a jerk to a broker, they're just going to be like, thank you, next. We got 50 other people that want to buy this business. Why are we wasting time with this person?
And I'll give you one more. I say this on a lot of podcasts. Leave your clipboard at home. When you get on that first call with the seller and you're asking questions and you read the sim and now you got 25 questions and you're asking the seller why they didn't raise the price and why is the cost so high and why didn't you expand? You don't understand that as much as you want to get that data, and I understand you want to get that data, buyer, when you berate or when you talk in a condescending way or when you upset the seller on these calls, you get kicked out of processes even though you got your data. So leave that freaking clipboard at home, right? Figure out the top 3 to 5 things that you want to get to know. Recognize that on that first call, you were trying to ingratiate yourself and make friends with this seller. That's the biggest thing, because if the seller likes you, they're going to say, hey, Neal, I know you like B, but like A really impressed me on the call. I really like that guy. Can we see if he can get his price up? And alternatively, when you're a jerk and you're asking the seller, why didn't they do all these things? Because you think you're smart and you got your MBA or you invested in something to make some money, you forget you can screw up your process.
So emotional. It's so emotional. I mean, we're always managing, there's the money and stuff, but we're managing emotions. It's more emotions, I think, than the quantitative stuff. There's a lot of problems with deals that are blowing up, and I'm trying to contain them before they get to the seller, because I know if we can fix them, the seller just doesn't have to worry about that. And what I'm trying to avoid is, I got buyer B in this example, and I think they're the one, and they're having a bad day, and they're kind of showing their butt a little bit. And I don't want the seller to see that side of them. You know what I mean? So I'm looking at all these issues that are coming up. I'm saying, this is important. This is not important. I want to present this piece to the seller, because that's what they need to be focused on. So, but if it is a problem, I'm going to have to tell the seller. If I think it's going to be a long-term problem that's going to, affect the deal or the buyer's performance. So just be mindful as a buyer, kind of the impressions that you're making there.
Totally agree. It's
Well,
more emotional than people think.
yeah. So we're talking about kind of these relationships. It's funny, like you're a money guy, and I'm a deal guy, but we're talking about relationships now, which is a big part of doing these deals. What about
That's
other
right.
relationships? So we've established there's owner, broker, and then there's buyer, broker, and then buyer, owner. These are like this weird trifecta, and we're
Yep.
managing these. But what about other stakeholders that are coming into a process, like professionals like yourself? Like what
Sure.
let's talk about other
Let's
people
talk
coming
about it.
in to a deal.
So typically within a week or two of a seller accepting a buyer's offer, they call it a letter of intent. So the seller
Yeah.
signs this thing. The smart buyers are saying, "Hey, I'm betting $1 million on this deal, $3 million on this deal. I'm not an accountant. I'm going to get what's called a quality of earnings, and
Yeah.
and so I provide quality of earnings for buyers who are buying businesses, and
Yeah.
quality of earnings may be foreign to you, so let's just take it down a notch.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah, what's the
mini
quality of
audit.
earnings? Yeah.
It's a mini audit. It's a
Yeah.
30-day process to take. So here's the reality of private company financials. The seller hasn't had to optimize the presentation of them because typically they're the only owner. There's no
Yeah.
other owners. And so their financials are not audited and they've never had to be evaluated like this. And so a lot
Yeah.
of what I do is just take the financials that work completely fine for the seller and put them into a package where any investor, any bank, any buyer can understand exactly what the profit is, the margins, the balance sheet, the assets. And
Yeah.
once you present those financials cleanly, the buyer can sort of consummate and finish their process to get to close. So
Yeah.
it's a 30-day thing. It's data intensive, but it's mission critical because you just can't, well, like a used car lot, there's no take back. So once you buy the business,
Yeah.
you can't say, hey man, I didn't know about this thing. I want to return it. There's no counter to return the
Yeah.
$1 million. So you got to do all your diligence work up front.
I love how the automotive trade is sneaking into it as a second theme in this. But
Yeah.
so this is a great point though. So I love this, owner has an interpretation of honestly, a lot of owners don't know how much money they make. They know how much is in
That's
their
right.
bank account, but they're
That's
really
right.
relying on their bookkeeper and their accountant for financial
That's right.
statements. But they're not doing these external audits. And then the broker comes in, broker
Yep.
makes their own evaluation,
That's
but
right.
they're representing the seller, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So let's not trust the dirty broker. I use that term in joking.
I
I
like
hold
how you
myself
do
in
that.
high esteem, but
Yeah.
I do know that people don't trust brokers, so I like to kind of play into that a little bit. So you got the owner, you got the broker, and now you got a buyer. Buyer's got to
Yep.
have somebody advocating for them. They can't just take the word of the owner or the owner's team or the broker. And this is where a professional like yourself can really, buyers are going to make a big investment in a business. Why make I heard a really smart person say, why make $1 million mistake when you can invest 10 grand or 20 grand into a quality of earnings and
Yeah.
save all that money.
Yeah. And there's a
So
graveyard of people who thought they were smart enough financially to do a transaction accounting
yeah,
during a very action-packed 90 days to close. It's crazy. And so
yeah.
that's also, I want to talk about a couple of things that I think people get wrong in this process. So
Okay.
everything that Neal just said. So the broker does the best job the broker can do to put the financials into as clean of a package as they can. Is the broker a CPA, an accountant, a transaction accountant? No. So their very best job is their very best job. It is not what a 15-year, 20-year transaction accountant veteran is going to do. It's not their job to do that work. Let's say another person that people think does this work. Oh, well, the bank at the SBA is going to do this job. No, the bank is 90% guaranteed by the government, 100% guaranteed by your personal assets. And a lot of people, instead of filing for bankruptcy when they don't do well in these deals, go work a job to pay off that $1 million personal guarantee that they put up. So
Yeah.
think about all the coverage the bank has. They just need to be secure enough that subject to all that guarantee that they're not short-ended. And a
Yeah.
lot of these banks are selling the loans. So when you say, hey man, the bank's going to check this, I don't need to check this. You
Yeah.
need to go to the graveyard of people who thought that and are now working off $1 million personal guarantees.
Yeah. It, and I'll add to that. I just went through our process and we added your process. I will say that there are errors in my clients' books that they don't know about, that I don't catch, and
Hmm.
only, I'll call it forensic accountants,
Sure.
people that take that they're looking for patterns. This is exactly what you do. But I've had some really savvy buyers hire people and they found stuff and the seller said, I didn't even know that, but you're 100% right. It's not always it's usually not nefarious. It's just like,
That's
well,
right.
this is a bookkeeping error. This hit a balance sheet instead of a P&L, and that throws off our profit. If you don't look for that stuff, you're gonna miss it. And that's where this work is really important.
Great point. And so when I start these processes, people think of me as the enemy, the buyer and the broker oftentimes, right?
Yeah.
So you have, you're
Yeah.
like, I'm a dirty broker. I come in and say, hey, I'm a human, and they don't pay me to kill deals. They don't
Yeah.
come to me for that. So
Sure.
I have to go through this process. I'm not trying to make it more painful than it needs to be. I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm not a trained auditor. That's not the lens that I come from. But
Yeah.
I'm human, guys. Like, I'm not here to ruin everything. That typically like drops the shoulders a bit. The other thing that's interesting, I deal with first time buyers. 85% of my business, first time buyers. So a lot of times they're used to seeing Coca-Cola's financials or Tesla's financials, all audited,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and they see something a little off in private companies' financials, and they immediately want to blame the seller for trying to get over. You need to have a good understanding of whether the issue that you're finding is something the seller didn't know, seller couldn't know,
Yeah.
seller didn't need to know because they're not an accountant, versus
Yeah.
something the seller tried to misrepresent. And a lot of what I do in my process, Neal, is ingest this data, some of it unsavory, represent it to my client who sometimes loses their mind and say, hey guys,
Yeah.
90% of sellers wouldn't know this.
Yeah.
Or the other piece is you need to be thoughtful about who else is in the process. So we're talking about behind the scenes.
Sure.
This is great.
Yeah.
I'm going to riff for a second. Hopefully it's okay. How good is the seller's controller?
Yeah.
If you had to rate them from the greatest controller the world's ever seen to the worst controller that's ever touched Microsoft Excel or QuickBooks, where do you rank them? And oftentimes the controller is the person that the seller can trust knowing how much money they make. So it could be
Yeah.
somebody from high school, somebody from around the block, somebody they go to church with. They didn't pick the best controller. They picked the one they could trust the most. So now you're saying, oh, well, Elliott, but let me talk to their CPA. Hold on, guys. Many of these CPAs get paid $1,500 a year to do taxes. They don't know the seller's financials intimately. So then how good of a financial package can you expect from a mediocre controller reviewed once a year for tax purposes by a CPA that gets paid $1,500? Would you think these are going to be awesome
Yeah.
financials? So
Oh,
give people a break.
I, I can't tell you how many times I've heard, and this is the behind the scenes stuff. I represent sellers, owners of businesses, and they're telling me, I know my bookkeeper, I know my accountant's not perfect, but my business is 37 years old, and they've been with me since the beginning. I've
That's
had
right.
owners say I've outgrown them, but I've had people have two accountants and they can't let go of their first one because they know their business, but then they get someone else because they know the first one's insufficient. This is real life. This is just
Yeah,
how accounting works. And people's
that's right.
businesses grow. Sometimes they outgrow, and that's how we see sometimes owners' information is just not perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. You,
So
you nailed it. You nailed it. And then I'm going to open the kimono on the QOE a little bit
yeah,
because it can sometimes be a black box. So all that we're evaluating, I told you it's a mini audit on a business focused on one key thing, cash flow, because buyers are buying cash flow. I buy a business because I get the cash that comes out. All that we're doing is we're taking different sets of data from the seller that should say the same thing, comparing it to each other and making sure that you can understand based on 3 different data sets having the same number that the business is solid. And we check taxes, bank statements, financials, sometimes fixed asset lists and other things. And we base a lot of our trust on the bank statements because Neal, you can manipulate QuickBooks, you can manipulate taxes, but you can't go into Chase Bank with $100 and say, hey, but tell that Elliott guy it's $1,000. So we
right.
use the rigidity of the bank statements to build a trust case on the financials. And that allows us to take financials from even companies that have what I would call terrible financials, which does not mean it's a bad business. But sometimes we get businesses that even don't have a financial system. And even in
Yeah.
those cases, we can put them into a package where a buyer can make a decision. So that's all
Yeah.
we're doing in those 30 days is just comparing data sets, validating things, and making sure the numbers say the same story.
follow the money, third-party validation, right?
Yep.
Let's innately don't trust internal records. Let's validate with a third party, be it a bank. Tax returns are good because now you're telling the government something, and most people are afraid of the government, but even
This is
that's
true.
not perfect. I've heard cases, by the way, of people overstating their earnings, paying more taxes than they should have, and positioning a business to sell at a higher multiple. And then maybe
Right.
they like, you can amend a tax return after a sale, which is a horrible idea. But there's crazy games that you can play. But to your point, bank statements don't lie, and the patterns that you guys look for as well. That's where a lot of the work comes from. How come you spent 10 grand a month on this every month except for this month, and it's 100 grand? Like those are the type of probing things that come up in a Q of E. So important stuff. And thanks for sharing with the folks that are watching what it's about. Because I think most people, if you say Q of E, people don't know what it is, and it is kind of a black box. So appreciate you opening the Komodo there and kind of sharing what goes on, what behind it. It is an
I wanted to do
investment,
that.
but it's a good one.
You can't bet $1
So
million what I would call naked. It
yeah,
doesn't make any sense. I don't know a single person that can lose $1 million.
yeah.
Be
And
protected when you
that
make
quote I
bets
gave, the
this big.
smart person who said that was you. For those watching, it's a good frame. I mean, it costs money to buy a business, right? It costs money to sell, and it costs money to buy. These are some of the conversations we have
Oh,
with
and
owners and
and
buyers.
my
Like,
clients that got the best value out of the money they spent were the ones where we found nefarious stuff in the financials and they avoided betting $5 million, $2 million on a business that would have tanked because it had no earnings.
yeah, it's
So
like
so
insurance.
I don't want to invest. You're crazy. Even this year alone, I've saved people from probably 40 or $50 million of businesses that would have tanked and sent those buyers to the poorhouse. And
Yeah,
and let me couch this in realism. So thousands, hundreds of thousands of deals out there. The lion's share of them are plus or minus what they're saying in the cent. I've been around this long enough to know. But there's a big enough percentage where you don't want to get caught with that 10 or 15% that's a
yeah,
complete pile of doo-doo, and you don't know which one it is. And so it's too big of a bet, man. And the clients that don't do a deal, that are
yeah.
still sitting at home with all their money and can go find another business, those are the
Yeah.
ones that got the best return out of their $20,000 that they spent with me on the QOE.
I think it's an insurance policy. You can do a lot by some of the stuff we talked about earlier, talking to the broker, reading the sim, getting a good broker will get you in front of the seller at a certain stage, and you can kind of do a gut check and understand if you feel like they're sketch. But it's going to come down to the numbers. And I would say that right now in a post-COVID era where we
Hmm.
have some of the craziest, we talked about patterns before, every pattern's
Yeah,
been disrupted. I'd say it's
this is
probably
true.
more important now than ever to do that deep dive work that you're doing.
Sure.
Well, we talked about another behind the scenes type of thing, coming back to working with brokers. This idea of broker responsiveness, that's the common thing I hear with brokers. They're not responsive. I can't believe you returned my call. You're a real person. You're calling me. This is crazy. Most brokers I reach out to. So
Yeah.
I wanted to dig in. What do you hear from buyers about working with brokers around this, getting back to them? What's the general feedback that you're hearing?
Same thing. People whine and complain, and I'm just going to shoot straight. The process for the buyers has pain too, and the pain for the buyers oftentimes is you have to get past the fact that you're not Warren Buffett. You're not Steve Jobs calling with $1
Yeah.
billion, certified in the bank. You are
Yeah.
just chose a name last week, Capital. Nobody knows if you have any money. Nobody's
Yeah.
heard of you before. Your LinkedIn doesn't tell me who you are. And the broker is serving the seller, and they just got 400 emails or inquiries on this deal, and you're upset that you didn't get a call back. No, it's the buyer's job to either do something to create attention, to get
Yeah.
the broker's attention, or to have such a great pedigree and background that when a broker checks your website, it's like, oh my gosh, he's done 10 deals in this industry. I definitely want to get back with him. Or
Yeah.
just keep trying. It's not the broker's job to respond to the 400, 500, 600 inquiries. It's the broker's job to find the best 5 or so folks to have conversations with their seller. And let's keep it real. Every broker has sold businesses to people in most of these industries. So the first people they're going to are the people that have already bought businesses from them, already bought businesses similar. Their friends have bought businesses and they're referring. And so if you're not in that inner circle, you just have to recognize that you're getting the second round of communication. And that's just the game, and it's okay. Don't blame the broker for that. The broker doesn't work for you, buyer. The broker works for the seller. Like I get frustrated by that sometimes.
So you know the process so well, and this is something that a lot of first-time buyers they're not seeing. But listen to what Elliott just said. You new businesses, especially if it just hit the market, brokers like me are getting hit with hundreds of inquiries. And our first thing is we don't want to talk to any buyers until they've gotten to a certain stage. It's like fast technology screening on the front end till we find that right set of buyers. That's where you want to be, business buyer. You want to be in that small consideration set that signed the NDA, that got on the phone with the broker to do a screening. These are things that buyers won't do, and we have to redirect them, fill out the forms, book a time. Got us your financials. You do all this stuff, and they're like, "Oh, this is a real buyer." Now we're going to slow it down. Now we're going to say this could be the guy. This is buyer B that we've been looking for. That's when you're going to get the more intimate FaceTime with the owner. So just jump through our hoops is my message for buyers. Do all the stuff that we're just trying to get rid of all the noise first to the consideration set of buyers. And then
I would say the same thing. Jump through the hoops. I bet you do. Whatever the hoops are.
The other kind of behind the scenes tip is if a broker's not getting back about a specific listing, there's probably something going on with that listing. Right? So we have it advertised, but we may know it's about to go under contract, and that's why we may be saving you time. A professional broker we send out messages like, interest under contract type of stuff. But it may be that there's a reason they're not getting back to you, not even related to you. Or business buyers, a pro tip here, if a broker's calling you, they may have just come out of contract. It may have just gone the other way where it's a really good time.
That's right.
So judge the responsiveness of a broker. Look into that as far as what's happening with the deal.
Yeah. And then I would say follow up, right? That one email, that one phone call might not be enough. Get over yourself, put the pride on the show. If you're here to get the best deal, you should be running your deals like beast mode runs on the football field. Just keep going. Neal may be a little bit perturbed by 10 emails, but you might get his attention as well. Yeah. So you got to just go for it, dude. Buyer's job is to get the best deal.
It's hard to be a buyer, honestly. I think it's a lot harder to be a buyer than to be a seller. I've done presentations on this. The amount of stuff you have to do, and there's just more steps, more risk. The seller has something to sell. They can always sell to someone else. But as a buyer, you're competing with other buyers. You have to figure out if it's a good deal or not, to find the money and put a deal. It's a lot. It's a lot. So I do feel, and you mentioned messaging brokers. I would say also we get a ton of these generic, send me anything that does $1 million to $10 million in EBITDA. I want perfect business and healthcare recurring revenue. We get this same email. It's like a copy paste. And we can tell exactly that buyers are going on Biz Buy Sell or Axial and just going through every broker and putting us on a list and just sending us the same message. But if I get something like you said, hey, I have bought 10 businesses in this industry. I am investing in the Raleigh-Durham market or something specific. I'm like, oh, okay, this isn't a mass email. You can tell if it's a mass email or not. We don't respond to the mass email stuff in general.
Or get personal. Hey, Neal, I like your YouTube and I want to buy a business from you. Right?
Yeah.
You're trying to win a popularity contest, buyer. Get creative, right?
It's so true. It's so true. I typically don't spend a lot of time with business buyers if they're not actively focused on a deal that I represent the seller. But I've had some people be creative, come at me with the same angle that you're talking about. I'm like, okay, there, it may not be the best use of my time, but I'll go a little deeper on this one.
You gotta try, and in this game, so it's the buyer's role is tough. At the same time, I think in some ways it's easy because I think it's as close to a pure numbers game as you get better at it than almost anything I've seen. Month one, you're going to stink, but you're going to learn the most because you're going to do the most wrong stuff and get corrected. Month six, you're going to be way better. You're going to be looking at more deals. You'll be a more elegant, a more well put together buyer. Month 12, you're going to be way better than that. And so you got to do the reps. You got to communicate. You got to also realize the competitive nature. Neal said it 3 or 4 times. I'm going to say it again. There's thousands of buyers sending that same email, that same one-page WordPress website with, hey, Neal, when you find that perfect deal, recurring revenue, $1 million, I want that $1 million monthly recurring revenue, or no customer concentration. When you find that, Neal, give it to me. And the reality is you haven't earned that. That's a silly email. You'd be way better off saying, hey, I'm actually willing to look at dirty stuff under $250,000 of SDE, even if there's concentration.
Yeah.
That's different.
Great. That's some good stuff, Elliott. And I know we've got a lot of collaboration plans in the future. I want to start to wrap things up. As you can hear, I've got, there's a labor shortage and it's affected our daycare. So if you heard some noise in the background,
Sure.
I've got that going on here. So I'm working out of my home office today, but that's just one of the things that are affecting business owners is the labor shortage. But I know we've got a lot of conversations kind of in the queue. So I'm looking forward to just digging deeper on this type of content. And this one kind of went deep on behind the scenes, the relationships, owners, brokers, buyers, third parties, risks for business buyers. But I'm enjoying this conversation. I'm looking forward to having more. And I would encourage people to follow me and you separately. So let's kind of share how people can find us. I want you to go first. What's the best way for people to find you, Elliott?
So Twitter's my main social, King of QOE on Twitter. You can find me there. You can put Guardian Due Diligence or Elliott Holland into Google. And if you get half the spelling right, on my website will pop up. My contact information is there. And I actually have a very streamlined, transparent website relative to my competitors. So you can find out a bunch of stuff there. And then I'm very responsive. So Twitter or my website.
Awesome. And I can, if you Google Neal Isaacs, Raleigh Business Broker, I'll come up. I do a lot on YouTube and it's just at Raleigh Business Broker. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm a business broker. So got real creative on my YouTube. And vrbiztriangle.com is my business site. That's where my brokerage is. We've got 4 brokers and we're actively doing deals here in the North Carolina Triangle market. And LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. Another thing I do kind of on the side for business brokers, a lot of business brokers that are watching this, I do a lot with the IBBA, International Business Brokerage Association. Highly encourage people that want to become a business broker, check out the IBBA and reach out to me if you're thinking about getting into business brokerage. I'll talk with you as well. And then obviously business owners that are considering their options for exit, that's who we represent primarily. This was not on our agenda, but I do want to give a shout out to Ross Zeiger with SMB Video. He's behind the scenes and he helps both me and Elliott with our marketing and our branding and our video editing. So check out Ross, go to smbvideoworks.com and he can help you in a number of ways. So shout out to Ross. Thank you for putting this together behind the scenes.
Ross is great, and Ross is helping me get my YouTube into a better place. So I didn't plug my YouTube earlier, but Ross is getting me into shape. So go check me out on YouTube too.
Absolutely. All right, Elliott. Man, this was fun. This went by quickly. I look forward to more conversations.
Absolutely.
On behalf of Elliott, this is Neal Isaacs signing off. Thanks, everybody.
Signing off. Thank you.